that doesn't allow this building to be leased or sold to a colored person. And that is kind of a gut punch when you're looking at that.
Racial covenants are essentially theft, right? So they're blocking the ability of Black people and other people of color, of course, too, to be able to own their own homes, and particularly own homes in communities that are seen as wealthy or will be wealthy in the future. So as those communities...
Roll call. Yang.
Here.
Ballinger.
Here.
Jalali.
Here.
Naker.
Here.
Prince.
Here.
Tolbert. Here. Council President Brenmon.
Here.
7
together to talk about racism in home ownership and housing in Minnesota. Properties that had racial covenants on average are worth, according to the University of Minnesota, 15% more now than properties that were redlined, even if it's the same type of home, the same size. And so that creates an unequal distribution of wealth. What we're trying to do is use this as an entry point for people to begin to understand systemic racism.
And so we want to be that conduit. And so for property owners who want to erase these covenants, they simply make the request online and ask for the assistance. We review the documents to ensure there's a covenant there and review the language. We replace language, take it out, and help assist in filing a new deed.
I work closely with the city attorney's office. It was really fairly easy.
It seemed like such a confluence, right, of everything that we were trying to achieve, and it seemed so perfect.
But let us give him a moment here at the council chambers as well. Thank you for that, and he will be missed. Consent agenda items 7 through 24 are before you for your consideration. All right, we're taking item number 20 for separate consideration. Is there anything else we should pull from consent? All right, seeing none, Mr. Ballinger moves consent. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion prevails. 7 in favor, no one opposed. The consent agenda is adopted as amended. Item 20 is Resolution 23-926, approving laws 2023, Chapter 64, Article 10, Sections 2, 3, 4, and 5, authorizing the city to impose a local sales and use tax in the amount of 1% for the purpose of financing certain improvements to streets, bridges, and parks and recreation facilities. Ms. Prince.
Thank you, President Brenmon. I am wondering, I would like to hear from our staff today if, I'm not sure whether it will be Director Rodriguez and Mr. Nix, but in any event, I want us, as we are looking at the sales tax going forward, to be able to answer the question of what is eligible for sales tax funding under the plan that we're bringing forward. This resolution says streets, bridges, and capital improvements to St. Paul parks and recreation facilities, plus an amount needed for securing and paying the debt services on bonds issued to finance the projects. I have gotten questions, and I suspect my colleagues have, about what beyond street maintenance, which I think there's very broad agreement that a new way to pay for street maintenance is in order. But I've gotten questions about what else is contemplated in using sales tax funding for. So I wanted to get clarification today before we vote on this, because this is the law that the language on the ballot will be based on.
Mr. Tolbert.
Just want to clarify, the language that we'd be voting on here today is as passed by the Minnesota legislature, as granted. We're not changing anything that they did. We're just accepting the language that they passed as a,
Right.
and signed by the governor.
Right.
So do we even have authority to amend what the legislature passed? Since they
This isn't to amend it. It's to understand what we're defining, what we told them that capital improvements to Parks and Rec would be.
Okay.
Specifically, that's one of my concerns.
Okay, so the thought here
So
is
it's
then
either an up or down vote. I'm not proposing that we amend it.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify that this was what was passed by the Minnesota
Right.
legislature, not by the city. So, yeah.
Right.
Okay, it looks like Director Rodriguez is going to join us for some clarifying thoughts.
Hello, Council President Bremo and council members. Just to elaborate on the park-specific proposals for sales tax, starts with deferred maintenance. As you all know, we have a $100 million backlog in our system to address deferred maintenance, so that is at the core of this sales tax proposal, to really just dig ourselves out of that hole that we've been trying to attempt for the last few years. There's also a balance of capital investment for future park spaces or park amenities, citing a new East Side Community Center that would include an outdoor aquatics feature in a to be determined location. We'd look to our system plan for identifying what that would be. We know that Hayden Heights and Duluth and Case are both prime candidates for the next rec center, so to speak, that we select throughout the city. Then also looking at an identified athletic complex within the city of St. Paul. We've heard strongly from our athletic community about having to travel outside of the city to play in premier athletic tournaments. While we have 26 rec centers and some athletic infrastructure, we don't have that dedicated space to host those larger scale tournaments within the city, but also looking at that economic vitality and tourism that those tournaments bring into the city as well when it comes to hotels, restaurants, and other things like that. But that is a location that we're targeting there is potentially 1500 Rice Street, which is our outdated municipal athletics complex. So that's a tentative kind of site for that work, but still much to do there in terms of advancing that forward. And then our respective river projects, which would be River Balcony and the River Learning Center. We would not use sales tax for the entirety of those projects, but we would probably use a portion of those funds to help jumpstart future phases and then look to private fundraising, philanthropy, and other things, working in tandem with the parks, the Great River Passage Conservancy on that work. So that is a really brief summary of what that entails. In addition to, I left out just general downtown park improvements, but that's cited as a separate project. Really just focusing in on improvements for Mears, Rice, Wakuta, and everything that resides within downtown spaces. Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions? I know Mr. Nix is here as well. Sounds like that was the clarification you were seeking, Ms. Prince. Okay. Ms. Prince.
I am going to vote against the resolution because I really believe that the $100 million in deferred parks maintenance and the state of our streets that include $100 million for reconstructing Summit Avenue are the kind of projects that this needs to go for, and street maintenance in general. Earl Street in my ward needs to be reconstructed. Suburban Avenue was another. I mean, we have ample street maintenance issues all over our city. And building major new parks and infrastructure, just the River Balcony, for example, is many hundreds of millions of dollars. So for my part, I really support strongly the sales tax for the street maintenance portion of this law, but I just can't get to the major new capital improvements that will then add to the maintenance backlog that we already have. We've done a really good job in the city of finding funding for capital improvements, but we've done a terrible job of maintaining things once they're built, so.
Mr. Tolbert.
Yeah, I'm going to make a motion to approve this, and I'll just add, obviously, I think there'll be a conversation over the next few months in the public realm about whether or not on the sales tax, but I just appreciate the legislature giving us the chance to have this conversation. As we know, our roads and our parks extensively need a substantial amount of resources. I know we've been asking since I first got on the council to diversify our revenue sources so we're not completely reliant on property taxes, and this gives us the opportunity to diversify those sources. And additionally, this is our opportunity to fund roads in a way that we haven't been able to fund, and we've been asking both through the League of Minnesota Cities and there to get additional resources. So I think this is a great opportunity, and I just appreciate that the legislature passed this amongst many other things. So I'll make a motion to approve this matter.
All right, so there's a motion to approve. Any other thoughts? Now, we'll support it as well, and just recognizing that this gives us an unprecedented opportunity to have resources for the things that we talk about needing all the time. It doesn't mean everything that's on the list will be funded. It just allows it to happen if that should come to the top as a priority. So I'll be voting in support as well. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion prevails.
6 in favor, 1 opposed, being Councilmember Prince, the resolution is adopted. Item 25 is first reading of ordinance 23-27, amending Chapter 142 of the Legislative Code pertaining to a special service district in downtown.
For folks joining us for the first time, or maybe the first time that they're paying attention to this, in our ordinance process, we have a first reading, a second reading that includes a public hearing, and a third reading where we vote. Today is a first reading of this ordinance, and with the first reading, we typically request a staff report. And I believe that we have staff here to report. Mr. Engelbrecht.
Council President Brenmo and council members, I guess I am a staff person. This gentleman is not. I'm with the real estate section of the finance department, and this is Joe Spencer, president of the Downtown Alliance, who I imagine you all know. I can give just a little word of what we're trying to do technically with this ordinance. We're looking to expand Chapter 142 of the Legislative Code, which was adopted 3 years ago to authorize the creation of the Downtown Improvement District that is in a portion of downtown. Excuse me. This ordinance amendment would authorize the expansion of the district to include an area that is west of Kellogg. We have a map. I suppose we can show you if you'd like.
Just put it on the voice-activated camera.
That is showing the area to the east of Kellogg that goes generally along 7th Street and then to Grand Avenue up to I-35, and then some properties on the other side, on the south side of 7th Street. So that would be the proposed expanded area, and this facilitates that. The ordinance process requires that we have, of course, the hearings. The second hearing would be a public hearing, and we have to achieve some public hearing notices and notices in the newspaper. So that next hearing will not be in a week, but it'll be on July 12th, so that we can get meet those legal requirements. 25% of the land area of the properties within the district, within the proposed expanded district, would need to support this, and 25% of the proposed service charge. We did receive petitions from 25%, and so we believe that requirement of the state law has been met, and so we can proceed with the ordinance. In the hopefully unlikely event that the ordinance is not, or that once it is adopted, that there might be objections to properties in the expanded district area, 35% or more would have to object to it in order for it to not ultimately be adopted. Those are kind of the technical requirements. We'll come back to you again also with an ordinance, a council resolution that will approve the operating plan and budget, and also the assessment or the service charges that will be, if they're approved, then we will certify those charges to Ramsey County, and they will appear on property owners' tax statements next year.
Great, thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Engelbrecht? All right, Mr. Spencer.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President and members of the City Council. Just a quick primer. When the organization, the St. Paul Downtown Alliance, was launched 5 years ago, one of the first things we did was look around the country to identify best practices. And the one model that very quickly rose to the top as being ubiquitous in just about any downtown you've been to is Downtown Improvement District. It is a self-imposed fee district to provide services that are above and beyond that which the city would normally provide. And in our model that we've launched in 2021, we followed very much in best practices footsteps. We have a program that's focused on a safe and clean programming that includes a safety communications center, a network that we call the Safety Comms, where private building security are in conversation and communication with police, with social service providers, to provide an additional layer, and it has been really successful. The most visible model, or the most visible portion of the model, is the ambassadors that you see out and about in sort of safety yellow with the logo emblazoned on it. Their job is to be out being a friendly face, checking in on people who maybe appear in distress or out sleeping, but really just cleaning up. In the last year, in 2022, we removed over 1,500 graffiti tags in downtown in the district. We provided over 2,000 escorts to people who maybe wanted a little extra help to their car or some assurance, and picked up nearly 300,000 pieces of trash and litter in the district. When we looked at all the great we were doing, we started a conversation late last year with the property owners along West 7th to say, this is the part of downtown, this is the part of the city that attracts the most visitors of anywhere. And when our visitors come, we want them to have a good experience because they think they're in downtown, they think they're having a downtown experience, and we want that to be at the same level as the rest of downtown. So we opened a conversation with them. Several of them were really excited and were able to submit petitions in support of joining the district. And so that's what brings us here before you today, and we're looking forward to working with you as the process moves forward.
Great. Are there questions? Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. Not a question, but just a strong statement of support, and thanks to you, Joe, for your leadership of the Downtown Alliance as a board member. It's been really impressive to see the way that you've designed and created this organization from scratch. And the impact on downtown has been remarkable, to say the least. So it's wonderful to have this amenity providing safe, clean, and welcoming services to downtown residents. And I also really want to thank the private property owners who are deciding to assess themselves at a higher rate to provide those above standard services in the West 7th area that's being added. I think that makes all the sense in the world as an extension of the Downtown Entertainment District, and I'm excited to see this come to fruition. So thank you.
Mr. Tolbert.
Yeah, I just want to echo that and thank you for pulling this all together. Especially, I think it says a lot that more people want in, and that speaks to what it is. And we appreciate all of your work, and I know you have 2 staff members and all their work too to make this happen. So thank you, Mr. Spencer.
Ms. Brents.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. Thanks to Bruce for the staff work. This is something that has worked well in other cities, and this seems to me to be a real sign of success, that it is expanding because the building owners want it. So that's great news. And I just had a question. I know there's been some interest in the potential of residential buildings downtown forming some kind of a contiguous district, and I don't know if there's anything to report there yet, or maybe you could get back to us about that. But this is just really good news today.
Sure. Councilmember Prince, Council President, members of the council, that's probably a longer conversation, but we'll be happy to, we'll be coming back to you because there was a recent change in state law that makes that now possible, and so we'll be back for more of that conversation.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks for the report and the information, and I will move to lay the matter over till July 12th. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The ordinance is laid over to July 12th for second reading, public hearing. Item 26 is first reading of ordinance 23-31, amending Legislative Code Chapter 63 pertaining to off-street parking facility standards and design.
All right, and contradicting myself, on this item and the next item, we will not be getting a staff report today. We will hold our staff report next week in front of the public hearing to align with other resolutions. So Mr. Tolbert would move to 1 week layover to June 20.
I have a version. We're in
I think it's 27.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
To June 28th. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The ordinance is laid over to June 28th for second reading, public hearing. Item 27 is first reading of ordinance 23-30, amending the Ford Site Zoning and Public Realm Master Plan to accommodate a proposed project by the University of St. Thomas.
Mr. Tolbert.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm introducing version 3 of this ordinance. This version does two things. One, the version reinstates the original recommendations made by Planning Commission staff and the Commission's Comprehensive and Neighborhood Planning Committee. And second, the version contains enacting language that is missing from the draft in the packet, in which the city charter requires that the proposed amendments are approved. The city attorney's office assisted in preparing this and is approved to forms, and I would ask that we put version 3 in, and similarly on this, the staff report will be with the public hearing next week. So.
All right, so Mr. Tolbert moves version 3 and will lay over till June 28th. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The amendment is approved, and the ordinance is laid over to June 28th for second reading, public hearing. Item 28 is resolution public hearing 23-152, approving the application of Colleen Healy for a sound level variance in order to present amplified sound on July 4th at 30 Langford Park Bandstand.
All right, is there anyone here to speak on this item? Erica freaked me out. Mr. Lally moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 29 is resolution public hearing 23-153, approving the applications of the Minnesota United FC for sound level variance applications in order to present amplified sound on July 1st, 8th, and 15th within the Street and Beer Garden area at Allianz Field, 400 Snelling Avenue North.
Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Seeing none, Mr. Ballinger moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 30 is resolution public hearing 23-154, approving the application of Dance Co. for a sound level variance in order to present amplified sound on July 8th at 2 Wabasha Street, Raspberry Island.
Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Seeing none, Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 31 is resolution public hearing 23-156, approving the application of Nikki Hubin for a sound level variance in order to present amplified sound on June 24th at 1 Leach Street, Hope Breakfast Bar.
Is there anyone here to speak on this item? Seeing none, Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 32 is resolution public hearing 23-157, approving the application of Jamesita Poland and Samuel Roosh for a sound level variance in order to present amplified sound on June 23rd at Rice Park, 109 4th Street West.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 33 is Resolution Public Hearing 23-159, Preliminary Plat Approval for the Heights.
All right, and I will start this one, I believe, with a staff report from Mr. Dermody. Welcome.
Thank you, Council President, Council members. I'm Bill Dermody, staff at the Department of Planning and Economic Development. As you may recall, about a year ago, you took the step of adopting the master plan for the Heights, now known as the Heights, formerly known as the Hillcrest Golf Course. This is the next official step in this process. Very excited to be at this point with you today. I'm not going to go into the details of the analysis, but you saw that the staff recommendation is for approval, and there is a staff report going through all the required findings. I would like to highlight just a few points about the plat and then the significance of the action you're taking today. And I don't know if
we can.
Yes, there we go.
Yep, it works.
We have the visual up here. This is the plat, and you'll recognize it looks a lot like the layout from the master plan. And that is on purpose, but some things have happened since then. Among other things, there is a city park, a little over 5 acre city park that through the final plat that comes after this will be formally dedicated to the city. And then programming and exactly what that layout will be is to be determined, but our Parks Department will work on that. You'll also see the rights of way, the streets, and the trails that go along with it, all the transportation infrastructure will be dedicated through this plat. And there have been some refinements, including easements along Howard Street and Arlington Street to handle district stormwater, which at the time of the master plan was a hope and something we're working towards, and looks like it will very much be a reality. So district stormwater is being accommodated by this plat. There are also some small tweaks in the rights of way to make sure we have room for traffic signals if they're necessary in the future and that sort of thing. Our Public Works Department has signed off on the right-of-way widths for this plat, and so it's been refined a little bit. We have the right-of-way that we need through this plat. The big significance of this step for this project is that the developer, the Port Authority, can move ahead with remediation of the pollution on the site. You may recall that there's a lot of mercury on the site from the former golf course use, and once the pre-plat is approved, they can apply to move dirt, essentially. They can affect the grade of the land, as our zoning code says, and so this is a big step that will allow them to start moving dirt. They hope to pull those permits very quickly. Parallel, they're also working on site plans, and we're in an intermediate stage of review, multi-department review of those site plans. So I believe we have representatives from the Port Authority, or at least their professionals here to answer any questions that you may have. But again, the staff recommendation is for approval on this preliminary plat.
And can you just draw the distinction between what a plat approval and a site plan is?
Sure, absolutely. So the plat is about the lots and the right-of-way widths, and the site plan approvals will be much more detailed. We're going to have an overall site plan that gets into exactly what the curb-to-curb width is of each street, how large the trails are, where there is going to be parking marked out, those sorts of details, future driveway locations. And then we will have individual site plans for each site that come through, and that will be, tell us where the buildings are laid out, the parking, the stormwater for each individual site when it's not part of the district stormwater, those sorts of things will all come. So at this point, it's mostly just a few lines in the maps to dedicate what's going to be the cities and what's going to be private property and that sort of thing. That's the plat step.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions before we go to a public hearing? Ms. Yang.
Thanks, Council President. Well, Bill, thank you so much for being here and giving this presentation. I just want to share that I am very supportive of this. This is a huge, huge opportunity for our community in the east side of St. Paul. And Bill, I am really grateful to you. I remember 3 years ago, we were meeting with many neighbors who, basically they shared concerns around like the connection of Winthrop Street, and really appreciate the accommodations that we've made in trying to push that far east as possible. Also in a way to not compromise like our housing goals and also green space goals at the site here, along with goals around economic growth for folks through job creations too. I did want to just share that like even to this day, we've still pretty much heard some concerns from them. I know for many of these property owners, when they bought their property, they already knew that there was, city-owned land that they would pretty much, they shouldn't be surprised if we're planning on doing any sort of development. Looks like, that was already, they already got a heads up about it. But I was wondering if you could talk about maybe like future plans for this, just because we do continue to hear from residents, and I want to make sure that we also are able to give them like a proper response about this too, because it sounds like there's still communication happening between our staff and also neighbors too.
Council President, Councilmember Yang, good question. So Winthrop Street is an existing right-of-way. I believe it's all 60 foot wide, and it's already owned by the city, and it's not proposed to be changed through this plat. Some of Winthrop Street exists in this stretch, but then the southern portion is, we've heard from a lot of neighbors who are using the Winthrop Street right-of-way just as part of their yard. And one of the directives of the master plan is to attempt to move the street, Winthrop Street, to the east to the extent possible within that right-of-way, to narrow it up and have as little impact on those yards as possible. Although it still will be an impact. There's no way that we're going to add 1,000 jobs and 1,000 housing units and all this infrastructure without having some impact, but to lessen the impact on their yards. And we're still working through that process. The development team is working on the site plans, and our public works staff is reviewing them. And this is an ongoing issue. We're between the 30% stage and the 60% stage of site plan review. And it's something we'll be looking at very much in depth, especially our public works staff at the 60% level. So it's an ongoing issue, and we're hoping to help lessen the impact on these neighbors' yards as much as we can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your work and connecting with our residents around that. And I do want to give a huge shout out to my staff in the Ward 6 office, because they've been so responsive to our East Siders too. So big shout out to Jay Lower and also Jenna. And I do want to say thank you to the council for your support and being champions at the Heights too, along with our city staff. This is a really, really big step for us. I'm also really grateful to the legislature for the $11 million that they gave to the St. Paul Port Authority to clean up the land. We can finally get that work started. And so many wonderful puzzle pieces are all falling together here. And I just, again, can't say enough how rare it is for us to have a development site like this in the East Side. While we're in the early stages and there's still a lot of progress to come, I also, really want to extend a thanks to all of you, especially to developers, Sherman Associates, JO Companies, and also Twin Cities Habitat, and many, many interested developers who have been connecting with the St. Paul Port Authority and also Sherman Associates already. The last thing I want to say is that we have really been fortunate to hear the opinions and perspectives of many of our neighbors, and I really feel like their input has shaped this plan to be the best that it can be. It's improved in so many ways, and I'm really hopeful for us to be able to achieve an East Side where every family, every household, individual, that they have a home to call their own, and also folks who are interested in moving in also have a place to call their home too. And so this is really a part of that vision, and I'm really honored and grateful to all my colleagues for your continued support in this, along with the mayor too. So thanks, everyone.
Great, thanks. And I really appreciate the taking a pause and acknowledging this as a key part in the project. As you're mentioning, when we move past today's vote, the shovels will begin to go on the ground for cleanup. So it's a big day and a good opportunity to probably one of many, many times that we'll be thanking all the people who've brought this to fruition. But today is a big day, so thank you for that. Are there any other questions for Mr. Dermody? All right, thanks. And I know there's other folks in the room if there's questions about the development in particular, but today we're looking at the preliminary plat approval for the Heights, period. So this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? One person? Two people. Okay, so I'm gonna wait as you're walking up. Sometimes there's like It's hard to hear. So if you could please start by introducing yourself and let us know where you live. You don't have to give us an actual street address, but just generally, where you live. And then we'll start the timer after you're done saying where you are and where you live, and you have 2 minutes to share your perspective. And it looks like you were going to put something for the camera to look at.
I put it on there.
Okay, so you have something for the camera. Okay, great. Now it'll come on in just a second. Okay, welcome.
Hi, I'm Dan Hunnicky, my wife Joan, and we live at 1650 McKnight, as it shows on the diagram here.
Okay.
And we attended all the different meetings because we were concerned where they were going to put roads and everything. Well, we got the map here, and the road is coming out right across the street from our driveway. And that's the situation. Right up in here, the road there coming out on Idaho, and then the overall aerial view of it where our driveway is right there. Now there's a pond on both sides there that they could bring the road out towards in the middle of each pond that way, so that it's not coming out straight across where somebody could come charging out of their driveway and then bring it into ours. And we talked about them. They all said they'd be real concerned about it. But then I saw the map here, and it's not there. So we're trying to figure out what has to be done or how they could move it. It could be moved to the center of either of the two ponds, and that way, and have that road coming out there. That's our concern now. So.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Your wife says, get out of the way.
I'm Joan Hunnicky, and we're here because we are concerned about McKnight. We face McKnight, and there's a lot of traffic on McKnight, and they did a good job of putting in that center turn lane, which at first I thought it was going to be horrible, but we kind of like it now because it does not back up the traffic. But the other side of McKnight, on the west side of McKnight, that's where I'm most concerned is. I had been in contact with Monty Hillman, and he said he had been at some meetings and they had brought our concern up, and they were talking about possibly doing some kind of remediation for the traffic, but we never heard anything more. And like Dan said, the outcoming traffic out of the development is going to pour right into our driveway. And, we're concerned about headlights going into our yard and, traffic, but I don't know how the city works, whoever the street people are, how they do the street, because it's a county road, I think. McKnight's a county road, and so I don't know who's involved in that, but I do want them to consider that, we live there too, and we don't want tons of traffic. I mean, there's enough traffic on McKnight, and we don't need any more disturbance in our yard, because it's been, we've lived there 23 years almost. And so we're kind of used to the golf course being there, and it's quiet there, but there's going to be, a lot more disturbance with 1,000 more people there. So thank you for your consideration, and we just wanted to speak to that.
Thank you. And it sounded from what Mr. Dermody said and what I heard Ms. Yang say, that we're looking at the plat today and that the design process will continue. And so this is a good opportunity. This is a good time to continue sharing these concerns. I appreciate that.
Is there any way we can show it or give this?
Yes, if you hand it to Greg, you said you want us to put that in the public record?
Let him know it did show up.
We were able to see it. Sir, when you were talking, we could see it.
Oh, you could see
Yep.
it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it shows up on the 3 TV screens around you. So, yeah. Well, you were busy presenting. You did a good job. So we got a chance to look at that. Did you also want to share your perspective, sir? Come on up. Welcome.
Well, thank you for letting us speak. My name is Tom Stefani. I live on McKnight Road, directly across from the golf course now. I've gone to all the meetings for public input, And one thing I haven't heard or seen, and it could be my recall is wrong, but I don't see with 1,000 people projected where all the cars of these residents will be. I don't see on any of the designs that there are parking lots. And I'm wondering, is the plan to have indoor parking under these 6-story apartment buildings, or where are the cars going to be? Certainly there'll be an increase in traffic, but I'm just wondering on site, what are the plans for the parking for these 1,000 residents? I don't know what that translates into, number of cars, but just a question for the designers.
Great. Noted. And they're here. We're talking about the plat approval today, but those design questions that you're asking, Mr. Dermody's here, and you can even chat with him once we were through this item on the agenda. So, but do you have anything to add to your testimony?
Pardon me?
Did you have anything else you wanted to add to your testimony?
Not at this time. Thank
Okay,
you.
noted. Your question is noted though, so thank you for that.
Okay.
Anyone else want to speak on this item? All right, Ms. Yang moves to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails. Ms. Yang spoke in advance and would move the plat approval. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Legislative hearing consent agenda items 34 through 43 are before you for your consideration.
Welcome, Ms. Mormont.
Good afternoon, Council President Brenmo and council members. I would ask that one item be pulled for separate consideration, and that is number 41.
All right. Item number 41, RLH RSA 23-6, appeal of Gaius Polar to a rent stabilization determination at 476 Herschel Street, apartment 10.
Ms. Mormont.
Council President, the appeal is of a determination made by the Department of Safety and Inspections that this building does qualify for an increase of 3 to 8%, which was asked for through the self-certification process online. That's more or less an automated process with minimal staff review. That application was received on March 21st. And I would note that last week we talked about a problem with DSI having the wrong form on the website, that they were using the previous year's form. You know, the application was made in March and still the wrong form was on the website. So the numbers we're talking about today are once again 2019 numbers compared to 2021 numbers. We do not have the 2022 numbers in front of us. However, using the old numbers that were asked for and used in the application, staff in a separate analysis when they looked and did a review of the MNOI, which was requested, their finding was that this unit or this building would actually qualify for, I believe it was a 13% increase, and I will correct my, yes, I will come back to that. Yeah, 13% is what they would be allowed using the old numbers. The unit that you are looking at today has an increase above the 3% rent cap. That rent proposal is 3.2% for this particular unit. The rent change is from $899 to $928. That comes up to 3.2%. That is for a 12-month lease. Were the tenant to pursue a month-to-month lease, there would be an administrative charge attached to the fee, and that would be taking the entire total of all the fees and the rent to approximately a 6% increase, still below the 8%. A question came up in the course of the hearing that if a month-to-month lease were pursued with the potential, which is indicated in that lease form, that there could be increases along the way. Could that exceed the 8%, those minor increases throughout the year? And the answer is no, it could not. They would have been approved for 8% for the entire year, even if there's minor adjustments along the way in that particular lease. What I will say is that this is a Class A property. There are no known code violations, and the primary drivers, which we know exist for the increase in rent, are property taxes and the consumer price index. Well, the consumer price index for this application was 6.05%. If it had been the current application, it would have been 13.95%. So again, you know, them coming out with a staff analysis saying, hey, you qualify for 13 with the numbers you provided, well, there's that. And that's even considering that property taxes, which for a lot of properties went up from 19 to 21 or 19 to 2022, actually worked against the property owner for 2019 through 2021. They went down slightly, where looking at 19 and 2022, they are approximately the same. So that, you know, had we looked at updated numbers, that influence would have been to the favor of the landlord. In the course of the hearing, the tenant articulated a handful of reasons that he believed that a rent increase was not appropriate for this particular unit. The first is that he was disappointed in what he understood to be an agreement with management that there would be no rent increase from his current lease into his next lease. There was actually a proposed increase, so there's that. The tenant also mentioned that he believed that a recent settlement agreement that was arrived at between Housing Hub and the Minnesota Attorney General's office played, he believed, a significant role in the request to increase the rent. We did discuss that thoroughly. A third reason is that he believed there were significant code violations. Again, this is a Category A building. The code violation he mentioned most specifically had to do with the lack of heat for a 24-hour time period in which space heaters needed to be provided, and then the heat was corrected according to his testimony. He also mentioned how fees were charged, that there was a different sort of constellation of how fees were charged versus rent. Staff analysis groups them entirely together. Though if it was charged as rent and changed to a fee, you know, it's still counted as rent. It's the same group of things counted together, no matter if it's billed separately or not. So the analysis does come out the same increase-wise, even if it's billed out separately as a different housing service. So there was a question about whether or not it was okay for those to be charged out separately, and the answer is yes, as long as it's still counted as rent or covering housing services. The role of the settlement with the Attorney General, the analogy I would make would be, you know, well, first of all, I believe that it's a cost of doing business, and that it is legitimately incorporated into, you know, what the costs are. In the same fashion that if I were to fill out my taxes incorrectly and be audited or not audited, but I may be subject to penalties and interest for that, and that's a cost that, you know, I did it wrong. It needs to be corrected. It gets corrected, and it is a part of the expense of operating. We are again looking at a significant differential between what would be allowed and what's being asked for, whether the tenant signs a 12-month lease with a 3.2% increase or month-to-month lease, which would have attached to it special fees, which would be closer to a 6%, all below the 8% that's approved. And had they gone through a staff determination, well below what would have been allowed even from 2019 to 2021, best guess of what 19 to 22 would look like is in the 20% range allowable increase. But again, that was not analyzed, just the 13%. I can field any questions you have, or maybe after it has.
I appreciate the analysis and the time put into this. And just reiterating what I believe you just said is that the property with the proper numbers would be qualified up to 13% increase. What the increase is being requested is 3.2%, which is 0.2% above what is allowed by right. And if it was a month-to-month lease, it would go up to about 6% increase because of the administrative costs that are added to it that are included in the cost of rent for the analysis.
So changing the type of lease that's used does add that administrative fee.
Okay.
If it were the same lease, a year-long lease, no extra fee.
Right, and you mentioned that fees are part of rent, so that would be included in
For example, if garbage is charged out separately where it used to be included as part of rent, the staff analysis would say, garbage is a housing service, we're counting it as a part of the increase in costs, so you're not coming out from underneath that expense.
I appreciate that. It's something that we paid special attention to with the amendments to the ordinance and making sure that any spun out fees or expenses were still considered cost of rent. So thanks for clarifying that as well. Any other questions for Ms. Mormon? Okay. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Come on up.
Do I introduce myself?
Yeah, it'd be great if you introduce yourself. We'll put the timer on for 5 minutes and to share your perspective about the 3.2% or 6% increase.
Okay. My name is Gaius Paler. I'm the tenant at 476 Herschel Apartment 10. I'm going to read what I wrote because it's kind of a general overview. I think it's wrong, St. Paul City Council, I think it's wrong that Legislative Officer Marsha Mormon recommended to the St. Paul City Council that my appeal to Herschel Apartments LLC's self-certified exception to the 3% rent increase cap be denied. Let the record show that I, Gaius Paler, said that, and that the St. Paul City Council was wrong for upholding Officer Mormon's recommendation. Why? Because St. Paul and other city governments are now not regulating, but instead partnering with property companies whose selfish business interests compromise the fair and healthy treatment of tenants living in their buildings, and even rating organizations like the Better Business Bureau, which Officer Mormon quoted as giving Herschel Apartments LLC an A rating, don't accurately reflect the business practices of said property companies. Throughout the May 22nd, 2023 appeal hearing, Officer Mormon was on the side of the property owner. She was demonstrating that she is an extension of the property company instead of an independent objective regulator of said company. For example, with regard to the property management company's Housing Hub's non-adherence to the property company's Herschel Apartment LLC's own written month-to-month lease, with regard to property company not by law providing sufficient heat, with regard to maintenance not being performed by the property company's property management company staff. See evidence of this in provided attachments. I could use this, but I would like to give you the attachments if I could. I know you're voting on this today, but I just want to leave it for the record if that's okay. Okay? And I'll conclude by saying the City of St. Paul's public contention rent stabilization appeal hearings provide for the forum for reviewing appeals of Department of Safety and Inspections DSI determinations on applications for an exception to the city's 3% rent increase cap isn't an accurate statement. The rent stabilization appeal hearings are merely the City of St. Paul's directive from the property companies that St. Paul now partners with to present an image of tenant consideration when in fact the city of St. Paul, as directed by said property companies, has no intention of granting an appeal to the 3% rent cap, increased cap exception. And I think some of the figures Officer Mormon was mentioning were not accurate based on my information. And again, in these records here, it'll show that there was direct correspondence to me to assure me that I was not going to have my rent raised. And they did raise it, actually literally a day before I was to have the hearing. So that concludes my testimony. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms.
I do,
Ms.
yes.
Jolly moves to close the public hearing.
I have additional documents here.
Close the public hearing.
Yeah.
To answer your
Mhm.
question. Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Do I give this to somebody or do I just leave them here? What do I do? Yes, I appreciate it. There's some overlap, but most of them are fresh documents.
Ms. Jalali moves to close the public hearing. All in
Thank
favor
you.
say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion prevails. Ms. Jalali.
Thank you. Guys, thank you for being here. I was trying to keep notes on what you were saying, and so I would just, if you don't mind, I just have a follow-up question. You mentioned there's a number of practices and things related to the property management that you had a concern about, and I heard maintenance not performed, and it was, I was just trying to keep up with, because you were speaking kind of fast. Would you mind just playing back that part of, please describe property management issues you're experiencing for the purpose of, they're not governed by the same rules as the rent stabilization review process, but they are part of how you're experiencing your housing, and I'd like to understand that better as part of our response. Do you mind sharing that with me?
I give you a very basic summary. I've lived there for about 26 years, and throughout that time, there's been a variance as to how much is paid attention to keeping the building running. And when this company took over, because I don't want to live in a place that's falling apart, I spent a lot of my own time trying to make up for things that don't get done. There's still a big hole in somebody's window that they never fixed. I've taken pictures of it. It's in the record, actually. I just felt I had to come up here and talk about it because at least it's in the record, even if it's not going to be voted on. But I think that the conditions there are not abysmal, but they certainly are not great. They don't have a caretaker. I basically, because I live there, don't want the place to fall apart, do things on my own, kind of on a regular basis, every day. And I'm not paid any money for that. In fact, now they're raising my rent. So I describe that as to say that the attachments show the details of that. And it's continued on through since the time they took over the company. Those were some examples. I have to kind of pull teeth to try to ask them to fix stuff. So that's basically it. A really acute one is where the heat wasn't there for 24 hours. And actually, I didn't feel very good that night, and I still had to try to get through it. It was my space heater. They didn't provide a space heater. I had to use my own space heater. So it's my bill, my money. If we're talking about money, I think there's something more to this than just money. It's the conditions one lives in, the feeling of safety, peace for the tenants, just want to feel like you have a sound place to live. Money is not everything. It may be to a company, but it's not certainly the case for the people who are just trying to feel comfortable in their living space. So I'm generalizing, but that's the overall feeling. And now they want to raise more rent. So.
And you mentioned I think, or somebody mentioned the 476 Herschel LLC. This is a housing hub property?
It's called Herschel Properties LLC. They are also the owner of their their management company called Housing Hub, who also staffs techs who, when you put in what's called a maintenance request on their website, come out and fix things. The two owners of both companies make a decision unilaterally, I guess, as to whether or not we are going to be charged. They determine whether or not we're responsible for it as tenants or not. And so I'm very careful about everything I do there because I feel like, am I going to get charged and stuff? One time the drain was clogged with hair in it. They charged us for that. I changed the kind of shampoo I use so I don't have a chance of clogging my drain. In other words, it's not just about a ledger and saving money. It's about the feeling of the tenants. And I know that I've spoken to other tenants who complained about things like who have since moved out. That's something I've considered doing. I like the neighborhood. It's convenient for me. So.
I understand that. Thank you. I appreciate you answering my question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. All right. Is it to me now or what's okay, thank you. This has been helpful for me. I have spent time studying this case to understand the picture of what rules apply to this. I guess I would start by saying I think that what you're bringing up, Mr. Gaius, is example of how a landlord could go through a process and actually make and substantiate a case about how they can qualify for an exception. What's not being captured within that, though, is, I hear you describing there are costs that you're taking on simply because the quality or condition of some of the basic pieces of the unit isn't where it should be. I want you to know that I see and understand that. The rules that govern whether a landlord can get an exception are about the information they present, and that gets reviewed to show the reasonable return on investment standard that they have to qualify for. And it's my understanding they have qualified for actually even more than what they could be getting, and that they're doing a incremental increase. The way that I have to make this determination is, has that information been substantiated? And in this case, I see that it has, but that doesn't mean that this landlord is fulfilling their obligation to you. And I actually paid extra attention to this case because of Housing Hub's poor reputation in the community long before the Attorney General had even successfully won like $63,000 of them for things like charging renters for carpet cleaning, replacing batteries, light bulbs, filters. Like, I hope you can see that I want to more closely involve myself and my office in supporting you with some of the management issues that are going on at your site, because those things should not have to be borne by you. And what I'd like to do is, I will move the recommendation of the hearing officer, which is to deny the appeal, but I would like to make sure that you are connected with my staff moving from here on out so that we can actually hold them accountable to the other rules that regulate the things that you're describing. That's making sure that they're doing what they need to do under the Department of Safety and Inspections. That's rights that you have under our city laws, separate from rent stabilization. Like, you can request an inspection, and we regularly ask for inspections to renters who reach out to us because their landlord is unresponsive, taking too long, functionally denying them like a part of their housing experience because they just don't do minor repairs, things like that. I would like for you to have some additional support around that so that your situation improves, if that's all right with you.
Yes,
so I'm going to make, just before you say anything, want to point out my legislative aide, Dua Yang, is here. I don't really know where she went. And so I'm going to make sure that you all have each other's connection, and I'll follow up and chat with you after this so that we're handling all of the matters as we can, because I think that in general, we need to be looking at and evaluating how is this new appeals process working. Clearly, there are going to be exceptions that get granted, but the tenant still has other issues they're experiencing, or there's another side to the story that the rules are not capturing enough for us to enforce the type of decisions that I would like to be making. So I want you to know, from a policy level, I am looking into that. So I wanted to just round out how all that fits together. I know that it seemed like there was something you wanted to say, so maybe if you want to briefly
I was
respond.
just listening. Would you like me to speak to that person, or?
What I'd like to do is, we're going to close the matter here and move the recommendation, and then what I'd like to do is you can chat with Dua right away, and then once I get out of here, once we get to the end of our agenda, if I'm still here and you're still here, I'll try to touch base with you too to chat more. So
Okay.
I appreciate you being here in person, and we will do what we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I appreciate drawing the distinction between the matter in front of us and the larger matter of the services provided. Ms. Mormon?
I just wanted to, because I have to, summarize for the record the additional information that's been provided. A lot of what's here is attached to the appeal document, which is the first attachment within the record. There is an attachment of the correspondence that's given the decision and the back and forth scheduling and so on. There's summary information from the city's website as to how to apply for the exception to the rent cap, and some additional photographs of violations, like some garbage bags in the window and so on, that was discussed. And in the not too distant future, you'll see another Housing Hub appeal.
All right. So again, appreciating the distinction where the analysis was completed, and there's a motion from Ms. Jalali to approve the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer with the caveat that she will continue to work with the tenant on other unrelated but somewhat related issues. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted.
All right, so my understanding is that that is the balance of our legislative hearing consent agenda. So but we'll make sure. So if you are here for items 34 through 43, but not 41, This is your public hearing. Is there anyone here for 34 to 43? All right, seeing none. Ms. Yang moves the legislative hearing agenda as amended and close the public hearings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the consent agenda is adopted as amended.
Friends, before we go, does anyone have news from the wards, information, updates, announcements, things we should know before we go into the weekend? Ms. Yang.
Thank you. I wanted to share about a grand opening event happening in Ward 6 tomorrow. It is called Bright Niños, and Bright Niños is an autism therapy center. So just a bit about their entrepreneur who invited us. Their name is Sebel, and they were born in Ethiopia and moved to the U.S. in 1999 and soon became a U.S. citizen after that. They became a registered nurse and worked at Bethesda and St. Joseph's Hospital. So they opened the center to support local families in St. Paul and bridge the gap of education, understanding of autism in all communities, and the support that we can give them. So they are very committed to hiring a diverse staff and really excited to go out and meet them tomorrow. So it is tomorrow from 5 to 7 p.m., and the address is 1627 White Bear Avenue, St. Paul, Minnesota 55106. So there will be activities there and also free food.
Great. Ms. Brentz.
Yes, also tomorrow night, Salsa del Sol will be performing at Highwood Hills Rec Center from 6 to 7:30. Bring your lawn chairs and dancing shoes and enjoy the evening. So that's Highwood Hills Rec Center, which is just off of Lower Afton Road on London Lane.
Great. Bring your, what did you say, your lawn chairs and what? Dancing shoes. Okay, I knew that it sounded a little bit more fun than just sitting in a chair. All right, any other news? Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. Coming full circle to where we started tonight and talking about money for our beautiful parks. It's not too late to join us at Party for the Parks tonight from 5:30 to 8:30 at Phelan Pavilion. I'll be there with bells on. We'll be celebrating our Park Volunteer of the Year and raising money for the Parks Conservancy to help support our parks. So it's a beautiful night. Come on out.
Cool. And I will put in a plug for Moore's annual Run for Refugees 5K. It is this Saturday, June 24th. It's a 5K race at Phelan Lake Park, and the proceeds fund Moore Services, which is located on Wheelock Parkway in the north end, but serves all across St. Paul and is a wonderful, heartwarming race and opportunity if you want to go sit there in your lawn chair with your dancing shoes on or your running shoes. But there's still spots if you want to run. Otherwise, you can just go cheer on the runners and make a contribution to more. Anything else? Seeing none, we are adjourned.